Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Doug Show. In this interview, I talked to Dan Freed, and Dan is the co-founder of Find My Formula. Dan's story is super interesting because he now has, I think, like 2 master's degrees. He studied at Yale and a few other very prestigious places. But the cool thing is he dropped out of high school and somehow made his way into these great programs at Yale and the other school, which I don't remember. But the cool thing is he formed a company. He created a startup after he got into nootropics. And a lot of the conversation is about nootropics and then just his story in general. Now, you may remember Find My Formula from a couple episodes ago because I talked to his co-founder, Adam Greenfeld. So if you haven't watched that and you like this sort of topic of nootropics and productivity and stuff like that, you may want to check out that interview as well. A quick note, I'm an affiliate for Find My Formula. I'm also a user of Find My Formula. In fact, I just took some of the Logic blend, the Logic formula stack earlier today, and I got a crazy amount of work done. So I'm very happy with that. The cool part is if you happen to want to try it out, you can get a discount. You just use the coupon code that I have, just Doug. So follow the link in the description. You could check it out. They do like a quick questionnaire. I think it's like about 4 minutes to complete. They ask several questions about what your goals are, and then they can recommend the right formula stacks for you. So for me, it ended up being logic, clarity, creativity, and energy. So those, are great for different areas depending on what I want to try and get done. Okay, let's get to the interview and talk to Dan to hear his story. Hey, what's going on? It's Doug Cunnington here, and I'm sitting with Dan Freed. How are you this evening?
I'm good. How about you?
Doing really well, doing well. We were just talking about the weather, like I always do with basically everyone. And it's a little warm here today in Colorado. And how is it in New York?
It was rainy most of the day, so it's warm and humid, but it hasn't rained for a while, so it's a change, which is nice.
And you need the rain, I guess, every now and then. So cool. Well, you're from Find My Formula, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I know there's a little bit of rebranding, which we may come to in a second, just because I'm interested in all those kind of details too. But for the people that don't know you, Dan, can you give a little intro about yourself and then also about Find My Formula?
So my story of how I got here is not that brief, but I'll keep it as tight as I can. For as long as I can remember, I've had trouble focusing. In school, every once in a while I would do okay, but for the most part, it was just a struggle. I couldn't retain information. I hated studying. I would procrastinate on my work. And when I was 16, I ended up dropping out of high school. And I mean, at that point, I think I was failing all of my classes. And then I ended up working in fast food. I was a sandwich artist at Subway, and I don't even know how many sandwiches I made and how many pounds and pounds of onions I used to cut every day. And then, through a couple really lucky breaks, I ended up becoming a chef. And I traveled around the world for about 10 years, cooking in different restaurants. I was fortunate enough to work in a Michelin 3-star restaurant in France. I worked on cruise ships, so for a while I was constantly traveling. And then in my late 20s, I decided to switch careers. Given that, I never went to culinary school, I never went to college, I didn't even have a high school diploma, my options were really limited, and I decided to go back to school. It was I was already very successful as a chef, making good money, had a great lifestyle, and it didn't really make sense for me to go to like community college or even a four-year school and then come out and I would be making significantly less money. So I, called a couple schools and I found one in the UK that agreed to admit me directly into their MBA program. And, that sounded much more interesting to me, and the opportunities I would have afterwards was exactly what I was looking for. And so they interviewed me, and the one requirement they had was that I had to get an 80th percentile on the entrance exam. So I can remember my ex-girlfriend, she was my girlfriend at the time, she had studied for the test, and she just gave up. So she had all these books, and she me. And I sat down and I tried to take a practice test the first day, and I couldn't even make it to the end. It had high-level math, combinatorics, permutations, all of these things that I had no idea how to do. And I'd been out of school for so long. So I almost gave up, but I tried out so many different things just to see, like, I'd always struggled with not being able to focus, and I was just done. I was like, there has to be something that's going to help me. Other people can do it. I should be able to do it. And that's when, among other things, I got really into nootropics. And I came up with a system of testing different, if anybody doesn't know, nootropics are cognitive enhancers. So they're things, some of them are vitamins, some of them are different types of supplements that you can take to improve your cognition. And I found a couple that really worked. It wasn't just that they worked, it was like a game changer for me. And before I knew it, I started scoring better on the test. For once, I could sit for 4 hours and complete it.
Right.
And eventually, when I took the test, I ended up getting in the 99th percentile, which dramatically changed my options for schools. I was accepted into one of the top MBA programs in the world, INSEAD, and so I started in Singapore. I finished in France, and from there I got a scholarship to get another master's degree at Yale. And I had never been in school as an adult, and I found the academic experience was amazing. Once I could actually sit through a class and participate in it and surrounded by all these amazing people, I loved it. So I continued my education at Yale, and I kind of dove into cognitive science, neuroscience, public health much deeper, and then moved to New York and worked in a few startups before I finally started my own.
Gotcha. Wow. That's pretty amazing. And I actually don't have that much trouble focusing, and did pretty well through school, slightly overachieving through high school and stuff like that. Then college kicked my ass. But it's very interesting that you had the opposite, because I was like, I'm not going to go to grad school ever. I've had enough. So super interesting. And did you find people were really surprised to hear your story and how you got there, your peers in grad school and everything?
Yeah, that was something that, before, I can remember when I got to INSEAD, my peers were from investment banks, consulting companies. I didn't even know what McKinsey was when I got into the school, and I'm surrounded by all of these people and their lives. INSEAD's a really diverse school, so it's full of people from all over the world. But it was very difficult for me to adjust to that type of environment and to be constantly surrounded by those people with a very different background from my own.
Yeah, that was an extremely diplomatic way to put it. So nice. So how did you start testing some nootropics? Do you remember some of the early ones that you tried? Were they off the shelf? And then how did you develop your testing protocol, which I found super interesting as I was doing research to prepare for the interview here? I was like, oh, that's brilliant how you did that. So can you kind of take people through that?
Yeah, so I think the first ones I bought were off of Amazon. I bought some out of GNC, and I just kept switching brands. I couldn't find something that worked really well. There were some things that kind of worked. So I knew that there was something there. And what really did it was I bought all of these different things, and they were accumulating, and I started buying like the raw ingredients. So like, single ingredients, not a pre-formulated stack, and getting into some of the, reading the clinical trials and all of this. But what really did it was I just took everything and I gave it to my roommate, like all of my supplies. And I said, listen, at this point, I don't know what's working or not because I've done all this research. I have this huge placebo effect. Why don't you just take these, put them in bags for me, label it like day 1, day 2, day 3, and I'm going to take them. And I have no idea what I'm taking. And I hooked up a bunch of productivity tracking apps to my computer. And I just kept journals and notes of all these different things. How many times do I check social media? How long are my study or work sessions? Things like that. And I said, if these things are working, I should notice a difference. The data will show what's actually working. And after a couple of months, I went back and I looked, and it was really clear. Some ingredients had a huge impact on my overall productivity and well-being. Some things just didn't work for me. And that was kind of how I started the company. My friends saw that I was doing this. At that time when I was doing like the fully blinded trials, a lot of my friends were academics. And so they said, hey, like this looks interesting. Can you make me one? And so I started making these trial packs for friends out of my apartment. And these people loved it. And before I knew it, like people are texting me like, wow, this was amazing. Where can I buy some? And I started selling them. And then one day, I was working in a bunch of different startups at that point. And I was like, I have these people texting me trying to buy this thing. Like, why don't I just do this? I put up an ad on, I think our first one was on AdWords on Google. And then we got our first real customer. And then we got more and more. And before I knew it, we had hundreds and then thousands of people going through this trial. And that's how the company started.
Wow. And how long ago was that? Was it pretty quick to ramp up?
So we had a lot of setbacks. It ramped up really quick in the first couple of weeks. Once I put up that ad, we had live customers. Some people loved it, some people hated it. The packaging wasn't right. There were tons of little glitches to work out. We were profitable from, I think, week 2. And this was also, nootropics were relatively new. And so the people, when I think of our packaging, like I was making this stuff at my apartment, putting pills into different bags. It wasn't really professional at all. And it's amazing that these people would do something like that, like trust such a young company with their brains. It still amazes me. And then, my co-founder came on board shortly after that, my first co-founder. And we started building out the technology product and scaling up.
Very cool. And one thing that I assumed, you could tell me if I'm incorrect or correct, but yeah, I saw some like off-the-shelf nootropics from like GNC, and I almost bought it, and then I was like doing a tiny bit of research and I was like, it has to be a compromise, right? Because there are so many different ingredients in there. It has to be like just barely effective and just, like I said, a compromise for every aspect. Where one thing I love about formula is it's like specifically each formula, you'll say it in a better way, Dan, but like basically each formula has its strengths and weaknesses, and it's a different set of ingredients. And that makes perfect sense to me versus like, okay, every day I try and take a nootropic from like GNC or wherever, it will just be a compromise across the board. So is that a correct assumption or not correct?
Yeah, you explained it really well. The way I look at it, it's absurd. The way these companies, like the standard way most nootropics companies operate is they get a formulator. So usually somebody with a PhD, something like that. They'll go through, they'll read the clinical trials, they'll say, hey, these ingredients have shown to improve cognition. Let's throw them all in a pill. we have the best formula. It's going to work amazing for everybody. Take it every day. And your brain just doesn't work like that. So your brain is different from my brain. Like you said, you were able to focus in school. That wasn't your problem. That wasn't your limitation. Mine was completely different. And that's because of my unique brain chemistry. And so what we did, we tested more than 100 different ingredients on thousands of people and got instant feedback on what's working and what's not. So we eliminated all the ingredients that weren't having a noticeable impact on people. And then we started bundling them together into stacks, which are basically formulas that have a synergistic effect. And people started reporting, this was amazing to me. People were like, listen, when I take this pack, and back then I think it was just numbers, so it's like when I take the number 1 pack, I feel so much energy and I'm really social. When I take the number 2 pack, like I just want to sit down and get work done. And then that was kind of like the next step where we started making these stacks for specific goals, where people could, and it still basically works like this, where we recommend them a number of different packs to try, and then they tell us which ones they like the best.
Very cool. And yeah, and I generally try to follow there's a logic formula pack, and like if I'm doing like spreadsheet work or analytics or something, then I'll take that. And then if I'm doing like writing or maybe doing some brainstorming or something, then the creativity. So I found it to be relatively like what I expected. So that's one reason why we're talking, by the way. I was like, hey, this is great. It's actually working for me. So what do you do, Dan? Like on a daily basis, do you take 1-2 packs? Like how do you, what's your sort of regimen?
So I try to, and this is probably what helped me out the most, aside from just nootropics. So, we didn't touch on different workout routines, dieting, things like that. But I try to structure my days around specific types of tasks. So, I'll have a creative day where I'm doing a lot of content, blog posts, podcasts, things like that. I'll have, an analytics day where I'm optimizing our ad campaigns, I'm working in spreadsheets, stuff like that. And I found, structuring my week like that around specific types of tasks, the nootropics just fit in. It's like a natural. I know, like, okay, I'm going to be doing a lot of writing today. It's my creativity stack. The one that I use more as needed is the energy one. So, if I'm not sleeping that much, which sometimes is common, I'll take an energy pack the next day. I also use that for any type of heavy workout.
Got it. Cool. And that, that totally makes sense as well. And actually, since you mentioned diet and working out and stuff like that, definitely interested in hearing about that. As we were doing the sound check earlier, I asked you what you had for breakfast. You said nothing, and you haven't had anything. You're a couple hours different, so it is solidly dinner time. So what are you doing right now? Are you intermittent fasting or fasting for a little longer, or what's going on?
I'm just hungry.
You're just hungry.
So I fast. I do short fast, long fast, intermittent fasting, a lot of different types. It has a lot of benefits and it's helped me out a lot. Today, it was just from the second I woke up, I've been running between meetings. I was late to this, and I just did not physically have time to sit down and eat, which I would not recommend.
Okay. It's a little different. So I'm keeping you from dinner. So, all right, we'll be quick about this. Cool. And I was going to say, I've been experimenting with some intermittent fasting and really have found it helpful just overall, like from a productivity standpoint, but also it made it really obvious when I was eating like a bad combination of food. Maybe it's really tasty, like say pizza, which I love, but if I have like some pizza or like a big sandwich with a lot of carbs and bread and stuff like that, I would just be like, I want to take a nap all afternoon, which now, it's obvious to me now that I've done this for a few weeks and I'm fasting like maybe 2 to 4 times a week, but really helpful. So I guess from your perspective and experience, is there a way that you would recommend someone like dabble in intermittent fasting if they want to try it out and maybe get some of the same benefits?
Yeah, I mean, so with diet, I was lucky. I've never been overweight in my life, and I can remember one of the courses I took at Yale. I was with their public health school, and it was on interventions for obesity. And we were evaluating all these different interventions. We used to have doctors who did bariatric surgery come into the class, and we had all these different types of things. And, we talked to patients, so we talked to people who were obese. And just from like a cognitive science standpoint, like all of these people were so motivated to change their behavior and to get slim. Like some of them were literally dying because they couldn't change how they consumed food. And there are some that had disorders and things like that, so I don't want to just lump everybody in. But for the most part, these people were trying for behavioral change and they couldn't do it. So that's when I said, well, I've never been on a diet. Let me try some stuff and see what it's actually like. So I did more of an experience, and then the benefits I got. I mean, I did all of these, crazy fad diets, juice cleanses. I did the master cleanse where you're drinking, cayenne pepper and all these different types of caloric restriction. And I found a couple things that were really helpful. For me, ketosis is amazing. I never stay in it for more than a month or two. But I go back and forth, for cognitive benefits and also just for energy levels. And I'll go into full ketosis. So I prepare all my meals. And then I basically just take a crock pot, put a huge chunk of meat in, fresh vegetables, and usually like I do a lot of curries, Thai curries, something like that for flavoring because it goes good with coconut milk, which is pure fat. Mm-hmm. And then I just eat that for a week, and then I cook another batch.
Nice. And for the people that don't know, what is ketosis?
So ketosis is when your body switches over from running on glucose to running on ketones. And it's basically like starvation mode. It was a diet that was first, it's still prescribed today for certain disorders, especially around like epilepsy. I can feel my body switch over. So when I go into ketosis, and there's ways to test. They have the pee sticks, they have the blood test. Now they have where you can test the ketones in your breath. But I feel different, and my energy levels and my performance change. And in some ways it's good, in some ways it's not that great.
Gotcha. And like, I imagine it's pretty, it can be difficult to eat that diet. So is that why you only stick to it for like a month or so, or are there some other reasons too?
It is difficult, especially with my lifestyle right now. I live above a bakery, so that's also kind of difficult. The main thing is I usually hit a point where I plateau. So at the gym, ketosis isn't great for weightlifting and putting on weight. And usually I'll go into ketosis, I'll lose a lot of weight really quick. Sometimes usually it's about 15 pounds in the first month or two. And then I notice my lifts just plateau. Like I'm not making any more progress, and that's usually when I'll pull myself out of it.
Gotcha. Wow, 15 pounds. And is it mostly like fat and you just like lean up, or is it kind of like across the board?
It's across the board. So a lot of it is water weight that comes right back afterwards, and just there's a bunch of different things that happen to your body. Usually after about 6 weeks in ketosis, I get a 6-pack, which is great.
So time that for like beach weather, and then like winter time, you could put on the fat.
Yeah. And I mean, Keto is not for everyone. My body responds really well to it. It's similar to like brain chemistry. You have to find the diet that works well for you. I don't suffer from keto flu very often, when I do, I have minerals that I take that mitigate it. But if you've never tried it, I would recommend it. And one of the interesting things, some of the nootropics will impact me differently when I'm in ketosis. And we don't exactly know why, but we've had enough customers tell us, when I'm in ketosis and I take this stack, I feel amazing.
Interesting. And I guess it kind of, I mean, I guess it makes, well, you would know, right? Does it make sense? Like your brain's running off like ketones instead of glucose, right? So all that would change along with the nootropics that you're taking, I guess, right? I don't know.
It does. It's unclear exactly what the mechanism of action would be that would have such a dramatic impact. But it's like the interesting thing. So our company, I look at it as a bioinformatics company. And we're basically, the way that the data is structured is very similar to a clinical trial. So we have this massive data set of people doing all these different types of activities, from doctors studying for their board exams, lawyers studying, for the bar, and we keep track of all of these things. So they say, this is my goal, this is my demographics, this is like what other things I'm doing in my life, whether it's keto, what type of diet they're on, all of that stuff. And then we see which nootropics work best for them. And over the course of the company, we have thousands of profiles like that. And every once in a while, we notice something like, hey, the people who are going for this goal, a lot of them are saying that these nootropics are working. Sometimes we've been able to kind of like deduce why it is that that's working, and sometimes we haven't. We just see a very strong correlation.
Interesting. Gotcha. So for the people, actually, before we get into some of the recommendations and stuff, where did you get the first sets of ingredients and stuff, like when you were making your own formulas and stacks and you were experimenting in that first set? And then, where do you source everything now?
The first set came from Powder City. They're out of business now. They were the largest nootropics manufacturer back when I was getting really into it. Anybody that's been around nootropics I think they've been out of business for 2 years now. But of the people that were starting in nootropics around that time, everybody knows them. And now we have, so my background as a chef, I have a lot of experience with supply chain. And one of the decisions we made early on is we want, a very clean supply chain. And so what that means is all of our ingredients are third-party lab tested for purity. We actually, one of our customers is a PhD student, I believe in chemistry. And one of his projects that he did as a side project for his professor for his class was to test all of our ingredients. And so he ran these tests. He sent us the spectrometer readings, all of that, and they're pure, which we pride ourselves in. So if you buy a product from our company, what it says on the label is exactly what's in there, nothing else. We test for heavy metals, all of that stuff. We also source all of our ingredients from the U.S., from suppliers in the U.S., which makes it more expensive, but it's just a much better supply chain from our perspective.
Cool. That is another thing that I appreciated. Again, if you're just, you could try to buy stuff on Amazon, but who knows where it comes from? And I'm like, well, I don't want to just take stuff and maybe be taking too much and like kill my liver. I enjoy drinking beer, so I just want to let my liver work on that, the beer, not the nootropic. So anyway, for people that would want to get started and maybe test out nootropics and they've never taken anything before, what's your recommendation, Dan?
So, of course, our products. My recommendations for people that are new to nootropics, like on a high level, are try more than one. So in our starter kits, there's always at least 2 different formulas, usually 3 or more. A lot of people, and this is probably the biggest thing that I see, is people will go and they'll buy something from GNC or they'll buy it off of Amazon, and it'll be expensive. They'll take a couple of pills and it won't work. And then they just give up. And, I'm so grateful because I had that same experience. And instead of giving up, I took like this systematic approach and I kept trying it. But it's expensive. Don't just give up. Nootropics work. Like the question, by far the question I get the most is, do nootropics work? The question people should be asking is, which nootropics work for me?
Gotcha. And I guess, is there like a guideline for if it doesn't work? Because obviously certain formula stacks are not going to be like right for a certain person. Obviously, like if you have an upset stomach and you get a headache, like that's bad. Like there's something that's not working with your system on that. Are there any other like symptoms that someone could observe or side effects that are not positive that would tell someone like, hey, this particular stack is not for me?
Yeah. So we've mapped out all of the side effects and, the leading indicators that something's a good fit. So when somebody takes Noopept, which is one of our star ingredients, it's a peptide, very powerful nootropic, and they get a headache. That's a probably genetic response. It's never going to get better. So that means every single time you take it, you're going to get a headache, and it's not a good fit for you. When somebody takes our creativity formula, less than 5% will report mild nausea the first time. If they report that, we tell them, try it a couple of times if you're comfortable with it, and it usually goes away. The Logic formula, we found that an indicator that it's a good fit is super sensory perception, which is amazing. I haven't actually experienced it. I'm very jealous. But people will take it and they say, like, colors just seem more vivid. I think my hearing's better. I notice smells. Like their sentences are heightened. And again, that's not the majority of the population. That's a smaller minority. But for people who experience that, we know, hey, that's great. So we have this wealth of information. There's some ingredients that you'll notice benefit or side effect immediately. Some it will take, a week or two to show up. And we know which ones those are. So we know, if somebody's taking paracetam and after the first week they're reporting these 3 benefits, it's going to get better if they take it for 4 weeks in a row.
Gotcha. And I remember reading that in the documentation that you guys had where, like you said, some of them it takes a little while. Is it like it needs to sort of like build up in your system or your system?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, which formula stack was that one that had the paracetam?
Paracetam's in the Logic.
Okay.
So the Logic stack for you is oxiracetam and paracetam. The paracetam, you're not going to really notice benefits immediately, but the oxiracetam you are. So all of our formulas have at least one ingredient that's going to give you an immediate impact. Some of them, when taken regularly, have long-term benefits. And we help people cycle, and all of our customers can text us, email us, and we're working on building out an app where they can track it. So we tell them, take this for 1 week, take this, how to cycle back and forth between the different formulas.
Okay. And then just curious about you personally, like, do you take any days off during the week or every day you're taking at least 1 pack?
So I have a couple different modes that I go into. Right now I'm working, 6 to 7 days. I usually take nootropics almost every day that I work. I also work long hours. Again, I'm not recommending it, so that usually means 2 packs. I would say that I'm an outlier from who most of our, like how most people use nootropics. But I've been using nootropics for years. I also, every once in a while, I'll cycle off everything for a week. Um, and then I also have testing mode. So sometimes I'll go, and that's when I control a lot of inputs into my body. So I make sure my diet's stable, my exercise routine, all of that. And then I test out new formulas and new ingredients on myself. But right now I'm doing, usually 2 packs a day, 6 days a week.
Cool. Got it. And if I am correct, each formula pack is, I guess it's like the dosage is low enough so that you could take 2 per day and it's not going to like destroy any organ or anything like that, right?
Yeah. So none of our products are hard on the liver. It's not going to destroy any organs. We recommend 2 packs a day. I would never recommend you take more than 2 packs a day. I have taken more than 2 packs a day and I'm okay. To tell you, like, so for safety, uh, I take them daily. My co-founder does. My family does. So I have a bunch of different family members on it. Our medical advisor is an MD PhD at Penn, who is my classmate at Yale, one of the smartest guys I know. And we take, when we select an ingredient to sell to people, we conduct an in-house systematic review. We look at, are there any adverse events? And we have all this information published on our new website. So we're highly selective. We don't sell anything that's addictive except for caffeine. And all of our formulas are available without caffeine. A lot of people choose to get it without caffeine. Some people want it. Yeah, so as far as safety, we take that very seriously. People are trusting us with their brains.
Indeed. All right, cool, Dan. Well, thanks for joining me today. Is there any other stuff that you want to mention? Obviously, people could find you over at Find My Formula, and I'll put links for everything. But yeah, any other things you want to share?
No, I mean, it's always great to talk to a customer and somebody who's happy with our products. I was looking through your YouTube channel, and I can remember, even while I've been working on this company, I've had side gigs, and I've had to just to make ends meet, and a lot of times, I taught myself marketing, I taught myself paid acquisition by watching YouTube videos from people like you. And I know how hard it is to stay motivated and to manage all those things. And it's amazing, like the company's grown a lot. It's amazing to see where it is now and to make all of those hours of like, it was so difficult in the beginning to see it finally pay off. We closed an investment this week. A larger investment. We just had one person start this week. We have another person starting next week. And so for the people that are watching your channel, similar to me, 2 years ago, just keep going. Like it's so worth it when it finally pays off.
Yeah, you said it, man. It looks like you're in a hole, and maybe you are, but like if you keep digging out, like you'll get out. You'll get out.
Yeah,
so
and it's the same. Like, so I I go back, maybe a couple times a year to visit family, and every once in a while I see some of my friends, and to see the alternative option, the people that do just kind of like give up. I knew that I would never be happy like that, and I'm not. There's nothing wrong. Like, not everybody has to have a side gig. Not everyone has to be an entrepreneur. But I just, as hard as it is, it's so much more rewarding, and this is the life that I wanted.
Totally. Yep. And I bet we can go on, but I'll just underscore that with, I mean, I was very complacent and luckily I got laid off while I was doing some other things, but it's very easy to just settle. But I feel like maybe your personality based on your story is similar to mine. You get obsessed with stuff, right? And you like pull the thread until you've unraveled the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that obsessive thing, it's a double-edged sword. You got pros and cons with it, but yeah, it does really pay off at the end. So, well, thanks a lot, Dan. I will let you get some food. What are you going to eat, by the way? What are you going to eat today?
I don't know. I'm in New York, right across from Union Square, so I will probably get something fast.
Right on.
Probably not very healthy. Yeah, that's the other thing about being obsessive and just the way my lifestyle is now. We worked very hard to close this investment and, to build up the company. The last month has been crazy. And because of that, my diet, my exercise routine, all of that stuff suffered. And my biggest priority now is going to be getting back to healthy and to where I'm happiest.
Right on. Well, thank you, Dan. Really appreciate your time. Have a good evening.
Okay, you too.
All right, thanks a lot to Dan Fried and Find My Formula. Really do appreciate you taking the time. So if folks are interested in trying nootropics, dabble, something like that, you can check it out and get a 20% discount by using my coupon code DOUG, Doug.